Morning, everybody. You're in the room for the Joomla, Intro to the Joomla API. I'm Linda Amiaga from the Joomla New York City Users Group, and the speaker today will be Elin Waring. She was involved with Joomla before it was Joomla. She's a Joomla developer, and she's author of the official Joomla book. Let's welcome Elin Waring.
Okay, thank you. Great. So as I was just complaining in the back, one of the questions I have is who is the audience for this talk? And Andrea and I talked for, I've asked her that question about 35 times in the last 48 hours. So I'm wondering who's here actually is a developer who uses the Joomla API and knows what that means, basically. You are. You are. You are.
Not for the API. Not for the API, but I develop on Joomla.
You develop on Joomla. So has anybody here ever built like on the platform directly? No. So what kind of things do you develop? Like extensions? Okay, extensions and sites. Okay, so are most people like site implementers? Okay, good. Idea implementers? Custom solution builders. Excellent. We're here. Okay. Right. So it's people. So actually, that's actually who I was kind of hoping for, because I mean, I think one of the things that as someone who works with Joomla and probably customizes with Joomla, builds extensions, but maybe isn't a profession. It's not like the main profession is being like, my business is distributing plug and play extensions. Those people probably pretty much, the people who do that pretty much know how to use the API. But there's a lot of people who are site implementers and people who are like me who just want to be able to do what they want to do. And so a lot of us have kind of learned bits and pieces of the API. And I just thought, especially because it's a small group, maybe I'll just talk a little bit about what is the API, what do we mean by that, and then maybe we can look at an example, and then we could talk about what can you actually do with using the Joomla API, and how can you kind of increase your knowledge of the API? Okay, excellent. That's a question I can answer. So the first thing I just would say is, what is the Joomla API? So API, it's application program interface. So it's a way that we interact. When people say, like, write with the API, use the API, they mean basically take advantage of the fact that what Joomla gives you beyond a content management system is actually a lot of tools called the API for making it easier to do development. So, and that's what the Joomla platform is. It's basically a platform of tools for building applications. So the API, when we say the Joomla API, and when we have api.joomla.org, which is the documentation site for the API, one of the many, is what we mean is this is this set of tools that we have for you and that you can use. And also, if you're trying to understand what someone else has done in their code, like, you should use it. And one of the things I post a lot on the development mailing list. I don't know if people here are subscribed. Who here is subscribed to the general development mailing list? Okay, so everybody in this room should be subscribed to the general development mailing list. There's 3 main development mailing lists: Platform, CMS, and General. And General is the one for people who are using either the CMS or the platform as a platform for building. So it's extension developers and platform developers.
Where did you join the mailing list?
Okay, if you go to developer.joomla.org, there's modules on the front page of that, one for each of them, and you can just click and subscribe. But they're Google groups. You can also just Google for Joomla developer mailing list. But the developer site actually It's not a big site, but it has a lot of important information like that, like how to subscribe to the mailing list. So I love the general mailing list. I think it's the best of all the Joomla mailing lists because it is people who are actively using the API. A lot of times they're complaining. It's true, but a lot of times they're helping each other, giving advice and talking about how do you do this thing in Joomla. And a lot of times what you see is that there's people fighting with things and fighting against the API, and a lot of what we're usually saying is go with the API, and the API will, using the API will make your life easier. You just have to kind of get into the Joomla API frame of mind to understand how it works, and kind of if you're used to doing PHP without a framework, then you have to kind of get past like being used to writing like 20 lines of code to be able, and that's how you know to do stuff. And you can do that in one line of code a lot of times in Joomla because we have this really great API. This is the whole thing that makes Joomla really special. When the fork happened back in the day, when the fork from Mambo happened, one of the reasons was because one of the ideas that the development team had at that time was that they really wanted to build out this coherent API to make it really easy to build stuff. And every time we've done a new release, you've seen, if you followed it, it's gotten easier and easier and easier to build stuff because we use the API more and more and more. So that's the Joomla API website, which you should be familiar with, the development mailing list. The API is basically, as I said, it's a set of packages, classes, methods within those packages. And we use it all over the CMS. We use it for other applications. And one of the things we do see is a lot of times that developers who aren't working on the core CMS don't always know, hey, there's an API for that. I don't need to futz with this stuff. I can just go and use JForm. Like it's making forms is really easy in Joomla now. I mean, I don't have to write complicated filters. I don't have to do my own validation. It's all kind of built in. And people don't necessarily understand that. And it's hard because you have to really actually look at it to understand it. There's a lot. These are all the main packages that we have. I would say the API, this is the Joomla API. This is what is, if you looked in your CMS and you looked in libraries slash Joomla, this is that folder. So this is the core of what we call the Joomla platform, and it's the core of the API. There's a couple other folders that are also there. One is called the legacy folder, and that includes some APIs that are used in Joomla 2.5 that are not going to be part of the platform going forward, but we're keeping them. Platform and the CMS can be like symbiotic, so the platform can have this legacy folder where they can put things they don't want anymore. They're a little bit outdated. They're maybe from 5 years ago and they're not modern web practice, but we have 10,000 extensions in the Joomla extensions directory, a lot of which are using those APIs. So as a CMS, we have an obligation to them to provide some backward support. So, and not to mention the core CMS is using some of those. So we put them into the legacy folder and they'll be removed in the future for Joomla 4. So the legacy folder, it'll be there in some format until Joomla 4. So 18 months, basically from the 27th of September. And it'll be there for the life of Joomla 3, basically, because so Joomla 3.
What is the life of
Joomla? So I was going to say, next question. I should not make false assumptions. Who understands the Joomla CMS release cycle? Does anybody? What do you understand about it?
So long-term releases are 18 months, and the short-term are 6 months.
Yeah. Long-term releases are 18 months. Short-term releases are 6 months. But so what we're happening now is Joomla 3 is going to release on Thursday. As they say, God willing and the creek don't rise. No, Mark, actually, even if the creek rises, Mark Dexter, he'll go to a mountaintop somewhere and package that up and push it out because he is on time.
Did 2.5 come out in January?
Yes.
So that's more than 6 months.
We adjusted because what we decided was releasing in January was a nightmare because a lot of the team wants to have holidays. And so having anything where 3/4 of your team is going to visit relatives for a week, a month, within the month before a release is a mistake. So basically Joomla, we got on this January, we had this January-June idea because Joomla 1.5 was released in January and people really wanted to release on the anniversary of Joomla 1.5. But then afterwards we were like, never again, never will we do a January release again. So they adjusted it to this September, March idea, and now personally I hate September because I'm a teacher, so for me September is a terrible month for release. So maybe we'll do a little bit more adjusting, but roughly that's now it's going to be every 6 months. So Joomla 3.0 will release on Thursday, and in approximately 6 months Joomla 3.1 will release, and then in another 6 months Joomla 3.2 will release, and another 6 months, and this is the weird part, Joomla 3.5 will release, and that will be the long-term release. And so, and then that will be supported for 18 months. So that means it's a total of 3 years that a release is supported. So people are like, how, this is like too short. But actually, if you, after Thursday, decide I'm going to build all my sites on Joomla 3, you will be fine for 3 years. So even though Joomla 4 will come out halfway through, you won't have to migrate because you'll still have support for Joomla 3. So it's a little bit complicated to explain, but that's how it works. So in the meantime, Joomla 2.5 is the long-term support release. So Joomla 2.5 is supported it's now been supported since June, so it's got another 15 months or so, depending on what adjustments we make, to be supported. And since that goes back to 1.6, it really will have been 3 full years of supporting of that release cycle. And we won't have any more of this confusing changing of first numbers in the middle of a release cycle anymore after this, we promise.
So the major ones are the 0.5.
Yes, the major ones are going to be the 0.5. So we had 1.5, 2.5. We will have 3.5 in the future. So that is now more or less our brand. It's the long-term support releases are the .5 releases. 2.5 is, the only thing is that the reason why you should go rushing to it is because 1.5 is not going to be supported anymore. So those like 2 million sites that are out there are built on 1.5. We love you, but you haven't had a security, well, we had one security issue in the spring with 1.5, and we did a release. And as part of that, I don't know if people followed all the details of that. As part of that, we had to say we were no longer supporting PHP 4, which if you're on a host that still has you running on PHP 4, you have a problem. But that was basically the last 1.5 release, and we'll stop doing security releases. That's what makes it end of life. That's the only way to scare people into migrating, is to say you won't do security releases. Yes?
Are they still going to have the, on the JET, the 1.5 component extensions?
Paul can discuss, you can ask Paul about that. And he can just be like, oh, I don't want to. What we did, I'll tell you what they did with the 1.0s, which is that if someone was supporting 1.5 and also had a 1.0, we let them still say that. But if they were only supporting 1.0, no.
We pull that out later.
Yeah. So,
just from an extension development point of view, how different is 3 from 2.5?
Okay, so good. That brings us back to the actual topic of the talk, not the Joomla development release cycle. So, oh, a blank one. I'll just skip ahead. So important changes in 12.1. So the platform is 12.1. So for the API point of view, from the API point of view, the change is that there's a new version of the platform. So Joomla 2.5 is on platform 11.4, and Joomla 3 will be on 12.1. So there are some really important changes in the API. There's also important changes in the CMS, but that's a different topic, and I'm happy to talk about that later. So what are the important changes in the platform? Number one, deprecated code removed. So the most important thing to know with the platform is it's a forward-looking operation, and they are very aggressive about removing old code. And there's some old code that gets put into legacy, but that's kind of the good old code, and the code that has not been replaced. But for example, JParameter, which was used for forms in 1.5 and was deprecated for the entire release, was announced before the release of 1.6. So it's been, almost 2 years that it's been announced that it's going away. It is gone. So if you are using JParameter, you're using deprecated code, you need to switch it to JForm, immediately. So that's one of the most important ones that I've seen. JRequest, no more. You must really switch to JInput. It's still there in the CMS, but it will be going eventually. So you really have to switch that out. The other one I've seen is JRequest, there's a couple other, not so much complete packages that have been removed, but methods or sub-packages that have been removed and that you shouldn't be using anymore. So, and it's really important. And one of the important things in the platform has added is really good logging package. If I put it back up again. So we have really good deprecation logging. People need, if you're developing, you need to have logging on so you see what deprecated code we used. And we have great documentation of and now everything that's deprecated, it's really marked in the code and it's logging. So you need to be tracking that. Some of the other most important thing and most important change to the platform that was the subject of a lot of screaming and yelling is this. In the platform proper, in the totally modern, removing a lot of the weird Joomla version of MVC, getting ready for HMVC, and going to support unified content model, going to be incredibly forward-looking. If you try to use it with an existing extension, it will break everything. So what we did, and this is why it's good we have a kind of good relationship with this thing called the platform. The CMS team and the platform team more or less get along pretty well most of the time. What we did was create that legacy folder. Right? So we created the legacy folder. So it's a second library folder. And what we have in it is J, of course these should be capital letters, but it was correcting me as I typed. So J view legacy, J model legacy, J model controller, no, J controller legacy. So what you need to do is if you're calling right now in 2.5, if you're calling J model, J view, or J controller directly, you need to switch that. And you need to put that word legacy at the end of every single time you call it directly. It does not matter if you're just calling the subclasses, like if you're using J model form, you don't need to put J model form legacy. That's all taken care of. It's just the base ones that you have to do that for. But some extensions do call the base ones. So that's really important. It's a simple copy and it's simple search and replace, but you do need to do it.
How long are those legacy versions going to be supported?
They're going to be supported until the end of the 3 release cycle. Yes, Paul.
So if somebody wanted to code an extension that would work for 2.5 and 3.0, is that possible?
Yes.
To do that in one set of
Yes,
code?
because what we did was we backported the legacy classes. So if you put legacy, if you put J view legacy into 2.5, it'll work. So what you need to do is go backwards. You need to make that change everywhere, but you can support the same
It was
package.
supported from the beginning.
It wasn't supported from the beginning.
So they have to be current on their
You-
2.5.
Yeah, you have to be up to date on 2. You have to be using the 2.5 platform, like,
So
yeah.
if your users are trying to install and it's been fixed and they're back.
And they're on,
5.1.
yeah, it has to be 2.5.3 or something.
So,
If they're current though, what you need to do and you don't need to change it for your existing users because they have both, but for your new installations, if you want to have one package for 2.5 and 3, just use the legacy, and the legacy will work for new installs for both 2.5 and for 3. Was that your question?
yep.
Yeah, yeah, so this was done, this was a lot, the platform team kind of pushed out this idea of these new MVC, and when you hear people talk around the Joomla development world and they say new MVC, those are the packages that they're referring to, and so they pushed it out, and people were like, this is going to break every single thing. And so then we were like, well, the CMS has its own API, actually. You should know that too. If you look in your libraries folder and you install the CMS, you'll see a CMS package in there, a CMS library in there. So the CMS could have just put the old ones in there, but the problem with that was then is some people wanted to use the way the Joomla API works is actually in the CMS. If you put in a class name, first it checks in your extension to see if you've overridden it in your extension. Then it checks in the CMS library to see if the CMS library has overridden it. Not in the CMS library, it checks in the platform. So if we had just put the old stuff, we could have just copied the old stuff into the CMS folder, but it wouldn't have, then people wouldn't have access to the new. And then, so some people were asking, how can I support 2.5 and 3? Other people were asking, how can I support 3 and 4? So this is a way that makes it possible to support both 3 and 4. So people in the CMS, extension developers, can start to use the new we do it? What do we have to do to be able to use the new MVC? The big issue, just people know what I mean when I say like J model list. Do you know what I mean when I say that? No? Okay, so if I go to if I go to, where's my, so in general, if I'm in here's the overall libraries folder, and I go to the legacy folder. This stuff all used to be inside the main Joomla folder, and there's a set of classes. I think the model classes in a lot of ways are the most powerful. So when you want to make a list, like in the back end, when you have a list of all the articles for that grid, you use JModelList, right? And that's used everywhere. Like, we love that. That was one of the great,
Just to clarify something before. So if we want to support 2.5 now as an extension, we need separate packages for 2.53 and under, and then 2.53 and over, because of this legacy model issue?
you mean if you wanted to support 1.5, 2.5, and 3. No, for 2.5 you don't need, 2.5 legacy is there.
From 2.50.
Yeah,
Oh.
not from 2.50, from like 2.53.
Right.
But no one should be on 2.53 because there's been security releases since then.
Yeah, but people don't update.
Well, but I'm telling you, it's like people need to update security. Actually, as a matter of fact, it's an important security release that happened, the one I said about the 1.5. It was one of those things that was like, these two computer science professors discovered it, and they wrote an article about it, and they sent us a paper, and it was like 45 pages of computer science. And it was like, oh wow, this was really hard to figure out. But then, you know, it's a published paper, so anybody can do it now. So they did present at DEF CON this summer. So
basically our answer to clients who say this isn't working is
update. Yeah, just press that update button. You know, it's one-click update. It's easy.
It is to press that button. You know how hard it is for some people to press that
yeah.
button?
Yeah, I know.
It's horrible.
It's scary.
Yeah.
I find sites they are on 151.
I
Yeah.
see it all the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, especially in 1.5 because we didn't have the button. But yeah, it's really,
People don't update.
they don't update. And you know, the day, I hope for the day when we can do push updates, but it's scary, you know, because we're not at the stage yet where we can do that because we can't count on the extensions being ready. So, yes, Scott.
One client had a site that hacked. I said, why did you never update? Well, the site was working.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, just another clarification on that. If you want to support sites from 2.50 to 2.5, whatever it is, don't use legacy, and it'll support all of them.
yes,
If you want to support sites from 2.5.3 through 3.0 and up, then use legacy.
right. You can also do version detection, but nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to just hack around and do version. You know, that's the thing. We could all, we're trying. I mean, people and the maintainers and everybody really tried hard to figure out a system that would work for most, you know, 95% of the cases. And people seem relatively happy with that, but because they didn't want to have this complicated code to check.
The main theory that we're using is that if you want something to be able to run in 3 and 2.5, it'll need to be at the current 2.5.
Right.
That if you want to get into starting to do 3 with the same code stream,
Yeah.
then it'll only work in the current 2.5.
Yeah.
But I can
Yeah.
still use JModel in any of the 2.5s.
Any 2.5s, yeah, it's there. It's just like an alias. It's just an alias, right? It's, yeah, for the 2.5, it just is like, if you call it, it just scoots over to the model.
It's only an issue
Yeah.
if you want to have it run in both 2.5 and 3.0.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, so I think that's actually the big going to be the big break point for people, and this is why, like, I keep kind of being a little warning people that there's a lot of developers and especially a lot of custom developers who are not reading the mailing list and are not reading the announcements and are not following the code, and it's going to be kind of a nightmare for the first few weeks of the release. And one reason that we have an update, by the way, you know, because we have short-term releases and long-term releases, there's actually an option in the Joomla update component that sets, do you get notified only for long-term support or do you get notified for short-term? And the default is only to get notified for long-term. So what we've done is kind of push off the pain of this for a while by kind of saying we're not going to even notify people to update until we get to 3.5. But it's sooner or later it is going to be painful. So you might as well take care of it sooner. And this is why people have to be on the mailing list. And the most important discussion about that stuff takes place on the platform mailing list. And also, the crazy discussion of it where everybody was yelling at each other really took place in the GitHub, because GitHub is where the code base is stored, and you can comment on people's code. Like, it's called a pull request when people send in like a request for, you know, with new code, and people can comment on the pull request. And there were some, what are you doing, but not as clean on that thread in GitHub. So, but people worked it out. It was fine. We solved it, and people are willing. You know, I think there's a lot of effort made inside the people working on the core to try to actually accommodate people working on either platform. And sometimes it's a little tense because the whole idea of the platform project is to be able to push forward quickly and to have more modern MVC, for example. And there's a conservativeness associated with several thousand extension developers with product that they want not to break. So we have that. And then, as I'm always saying, in the people working on the CMS is 37 separate components, and so every single one of those components needs to be rewritten to work on the new MVC, and that's going to take a while. We're not going to be ready to say the CMS is supporting the new MVC, so we have to have time. So that's the status of that. So I think those are the two most important things. The just search and replace for any direct calls to JModel, JView, JController, and get rid of JParameter if you didn't get rid of it already. I mean, no one should be using that anyway because it's been deprecated and JForm is so much better that you should be using it like crazy. I love JForm. I think it's like the best, it's almost as important as the ACL addition was, because it just, forms are so important all over a content management system. So I would say those are the biggest changes that are going to directly impact extension developers. The other thing, this is not really part of the API, you should be aware that as of this moment, we are not supporting the DS constant. So if you are using DS anywhere, you need to go through and replace it with a slash. There's a little bit of a debate internally if we should just put it back. But it's like sooner or later, if you want to eliminate stuff, you need to eliminate stuff because it's every time you have a constant, it's it's a tiny one. But cumulatively, if we want to support major sites, we have to do it. So I've been trying to install some 2.5 extensions on Joomla 3, and I did find a few with this DS problem, and they're creating folders, and instead of having nice slashes, instead of having a folder hierarchy, they have a folder with like something DS something in the name, and so it's really not going to work. Yeah, so that's not API, but that's just information. Just do a search. Just see where you're using DS.
Because that'll run on anything.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing about Joomla 3, this is related to the platform, is that we're not supporting magic quotes. So you must have magic quotes turned off for Joomla 3, and we know that's a problem on some hosts. And there's nothing we can do about it. And Joomla and magic quotes is it's gone. It's deprecated in PHP 5.3 and it's gone in PHP 5.4. So, being forward-looking, we should not be supporting it. But it does mean that people on shared hosting need to talk to their hosts and make sure that magic quotes are turned off, or that their host can tell them how to turn it off on their individual sites, because otherwise you're going to get a lot when you save. Well, number one, it won't let you install, but if it will let you update, because we don't have a way to check to stop you from updating if magic quotes is not turned off. So, but you will get a lot of slashes when you save if you have magic quotes turned on now. So that's important. So any other questions about that stuff? So basically, let me just say the Joomla API, one of the things that people have tried really hard to do is to make it a very clean, well-structured API with a lot of logic to it, a lot of common patterns and design patterns. Probably a lot of people know some of the simple ones. Where's that simple ones? I know for me, I didn't even know this when I was starting out. I didn't even know this was called the API or anything. But if you're doing JHTML or JUser or JRequest, you're using the API all the time. You might just not realize that it's actually not coming out of thin air. It's coming out of those classes that are in the libraries folder. So I know for me, this is something that I've looked up so many times. I just want to put the user's name right there on the page and say hello to them or whatever. So this is just an example of how we use the API constantly. We say, this is a class and this is a method inside the class, and we are able to just, instead of going query the database, get the user's name, ID number from the session, and then take it and use it to query the database and get the return of the user's name, and then put it in the right format. We can just do this in like 2 lines. And we can just say, use the factory, get user, grab, get, and then just, this is the user object. Just echo out the name from the name property from the user object, and we're done. So we just saved like 50 lines of code, and lots of places where, I mean, the two things I would say is lots of places where you could make mistakes, right? Where you could accidentally introduce a security issue. Places where, you know, just a lot of things could possibly go wrong, not because anybody's a bad coder, but it's just, that's what happens. Everybody makes errors. So here we can do things so much more quickly and so much more easily. And that's why it's so great that we have this API. And then we have a lot of APIs for really complex things too. I mean, getting the user, you know, it's probably a good like homework assignment for someone learning PHP is, yeah, get the username for this, for the current user. But it's so much more convenient. Get the J request, you know, we're always using that, even though we don't want to use it anymore. But, you know, usually you're using that to get information from the URL, like what's the view, what's the ID number, that kind of thing. What's the layout that's being used. And now we use JInput for that. JHTML for site developers. Probably people maybe have used that because JHTML gives you a lot of ready-to-go generation of proper HTML. So it just makes your life as a developer not writing HTML. So I just think that's like it's a very commonly used class. And you saw there's many other classes. There's the package for caching, there's JForm, there's document. Of course, JApplication is the one that kind of runs all of Joomla. So that's the first thing we do is to call up JApplication to start the application. JLanguage is what manages all the translation, all the times we're turning the strings, those funny looking string keys into actual words in whatever language. We're using JLanguage. So those are some of the, I would say, more important ones. And I just thought maybe, and we do have some upcoming new changes in the API I would expect to see in the next 6 months, she says optimistically. I mean, last year at this time, it was like, oh, we'll have the UCM in the platform in the next 6 months. It's not in the platform yet, but we've seen the code. It looks great. But these are, for example, Lewis has a pull request for a new cache live package. And it's not, as he put, it's not ready for merging yet, but it's ready for feedback. So actually, if you do use caching and you're interested in having a less crazy caching system than we currently have, then this is something you would want to go take a look at. It's in the, do you guys know about GitHub? Who's been to GitHub? Oh, that's not bad.
Great bar.
That's,
Great bar.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so GitHub's is our repository. That's where the code is for both the CMS and the platform. And in GitHub, when you make something called a pull request, that's when you're sending in new code. So Lewis kind of sent a pull request for a new JCache for people to comment on. Like, because he had it in his, but nobody knows what's going, there's 368 forks of the Joomla project in GitHub, so no one can really keep track of everything everybody in all those forks are doing. So what he did, and I think this is a good strategy for people, is he made a pull request, he put in the comment, it's not ready for merging, but I want feedback. And so I think that's a really good way to go about it, and we should all kind of follow up on that, and it would help. It would help with some of these issues. If they had maybe done that with the MVC, it wouldn't have been, we would come to the exact same solution, but it would have been less huffing and puffing and hysteria about it. So that's where we are with that. So I thought for people who haven't, let's take a look at JForm, and we'll go back into going live. Thank you. Yes, I can see that. I need to plug in. Tommy, is my computer bag back there? Thanks. So I was just going to say, let's look at JForm and just take a look at how a Joomla class is put together, Joomla package is put together, because I think it's pretty much a good model of how the platform team thinks about these things. No, it's, honey, it's in the back row. Oh, it's right here. I'm sorry. I was like, how could I have possibly left it? Thanks. So I think this is a good example of how the platform team thinks about things. And actually, one thing I didn't mention, an important change in the API in terms of how the platform is working and the CMS is working is auto-loading. So now we've not 100% auto-loading yet, but much of the API is auto-loading now. That means you don't have that J import that you used to have to do. You don't need to do in 75% of the places where you had to do it before. So you have to take a look. If you're using some of the classes, I mean, it's still supported. It won't not work, but it's not needed because it's just going to auto-load automatically. And the way auto-loading works is, for example, say I want to load JForm field. It knows J for Joomla, form, and then it's going to load the field file automatically. So it just knows from the naming structure of what I say to load, what I say to what class I call when I do that, like user, the thing I did before. It's just going to know automatically from the name. So that's why it's really important to pay attention to capitalization too, because that's how it knows to look for either a file or a folder. So if it sees an uppercase letter, it says, oh, let me look, like when it says JForm field, it says, well, let me look at the JForm, let me find the form folder, and then I'm going to look for a file called field. And then if I have JForm field, this is a little bit old. Well, this is not, the JForm isn't auto-loading yet. Because you see it has this thing, fields with an S. So, but if you look in one of the field classes, this is why you need to pay attention, because it's like, which one, like here's the color field. Do you know we have a color field? So this is called JForm field color. But if it was auto-loading, it would have to be JForm fields color. So that's why JForm isn't auto-loading yet. It is in the platform, but it's not for us. So this is not the most up-to-date version of the platform. So but that's the way we're moving. So if you're doing stuff, if you're making classes, you probably want to use that same kind of structure. You just take advantage of the autoloader. There's a lot of really good things in that for developers. So, so the way the class is structured, on the whole, classes are structured like this. We have the top level classes. So we have JForm. And then we have JForm field, and we have JForm rule, and we have the helper. So JForm field is going to be about, JForm is about the form as a whole. The other day on the general mailing list, someone was saying, I want to have unique. I want to require unique in my field. And I was like, well, username has to be unique, so just go look at the username field. And sure enough, it was right there. I should open that one up because I was like, I was so happy that I was right when I said that. Oh, it's the valid, I'm sorry, is it the validation? Wrong. So that's fields. And then the rules are the validation rules. So he wanted unique. So I was like, just go look in username. Because you can go validate equals username. And it doesn't really, all it does is it does the query, it sets the query up. So you can do this in your own field. You can go set up a query, check the list that's there already, right? Get the value. This is the thing people don't understand about JForm. you have stuff entered in the field. You can get the values right from the fields that people have just entered, because it's in the form object. So get the username that's in the field. Go and query against that against the database. Make sure that it's not a duplicate. If there's a duplicate, then send back a message saying that it doesn't validate. And if it's not a duplicate, then return true. So it's like really clean. You see, it's like really it's easy to write your own, but there's also a ton of classes that are there. So that's what I definitely recommend doing. If you want to write your own, there's a lot of good base classes, good examples that are there. And that's why we can do, I personally love the rules classes because you can write custom validation. So we have that color field type, right? And the color field type, you can validate color and make sure it's a valid color, right? So that it's not, if you did read the main JForm classes, you would see that JForm has very strict filtering methods involved, because at Joomla we always are more conservative on security issues. That's if there's a question, do you go more conservative or less conservative? We go more. So if you just put a field in with no filtering and no validation, it's going to take out all the HTML. It's going to take out anything that could possibly be dangerous. In fact, it might even filter to Word or maybe alnum, so just letters and numbers, but nothing else. So you have to actually be aware of that if you're making fields that you want to be able to be, have comma. I had one yesterday where I needed a comma and I forgot that this filtering thing happens, and I was like, why is it that my commas are disappearing? Or actually it was like, why is it that it's not working? And then I looked at what was saving, and I realized it was saving without the comma. So yeah, and that comes up on list a lot, is why is it stripping this? And it's because you didn't put a filter. If you want something less restrictive than very strict, you have to put a less restrictive filter on. So that's how it works. Just like we do with ACL, the assumption is you're denied, and you have to allow. So it's just our way of thinking about things. So this is how it actually works. I don't know, I get the sense that people have not people in this room, but just that there are these fields, for example, that people don't really even realize that are there or where they are. They might copy and paste stuff from other existing fields, but they don't really realize they could go and figure out which is the right field. Like sometimes, do people know, if people know what I mean if I say you're extending something, right? So a lot of times I'll see people post code and they're just extending text, the text field. And I'm like, why aren't you extending the list field? It already is setting up a list for you, and it's really easy to use. And then you can just customize that. So just start, it's not just the base classes that you can extend. You can start with one of these specialized ones, or group list. Group list is great. It's already set up for you to do the grouping. So there's there's just a lot of good stuff there that people don't. Do you know about the SQL field? Does everybody know about that? The SQL field just lets you, when you create your field in the XML, you can define basically an arbitrary query. I mean, obviously, you don't want other people to be able to define queries on your database, but it's in your XML. So unless they have access to your file system,
That's fun.
but you can define a query, any query. You actually don't have to create a field. You can just write the query and put it into the SQL type equals SQL, and then you have, I'll just open it up. This actually was in JParameter too. So type is SQL, and then how do we get the options? Well, we get the query, right? We pull out the query up here. query equals, and this is from the string element, so the element would be the field basically. So we're pulling in the data from the element, we're running the query, and then that's generating our drop-down list. It's right there for you. You don't even have to make your own class, yeah. It's tremendously great. You know, if you just know, like I said, there's two kinds of there's developers who are going to distribute stuff. If you're going to distribute code, you probably want to make your own class, your own field class. But if you have some custom thing, you're doing it for one customer, you're doing it for yourself, you don't need to like have that standard. You can just do this, because you're not going to modify it. You're not going to be getting bug reports from users or other users asking you for more features or to ask you to style. If you don't need to, like, this isn't going to let you style maybe in as much detail as you might want, that kind of thing, but it works, you know. If it works for you, do it. It's just like, I kind of think, obviously, because I wrote the book, I thought a lot about how we talk about how to write Joomla, and a lot of times I think we tend to write towards the audience, or we tend to write documentation for the audience of people who are distributing applications. Like, if you're distributing a template, you need to handle a lot of templating things differently than if you are just making a template for your own personal use or for this specific client, and you're never going to use that code again. I mean, yeah, you should probably write with the idea you could use code again, but sometimes it really is so custom that you're not. So in that case, you don't have to follow every single like best practice for if you're distributing to the world, right? You can just directly call username right in your index file if you want, or you can just call a specific module name, right? Whereas in a template that I bought from someone, if they sold me a plug-and-play template and they were forcing me to have this search module, I would be really aggravated. So I would just always want everything to be by position so I could control it. So I'm like, in the case of forms, sometimes you could just use SQL type, and it doesn't matter. It's totally fine for that situation. One of my other favorite rule ones that I think is really cool. People, like I said, I think people don't really understand kind of the depth of what's in JForm. So that's why I'm a big pushing it. So equals is a validation. So rules, when we talk about, you can write a custom rule. A rule is a validation rule. So it says, I'm not going to save this form unless this rule is followed, and I'm going to basically, whatever you're doing with user data error, you're going to make it red, or you're going to give them a notice that said you made a mistake, or whatever it is. That's what rules are. So rules are fantastic, because a lot of times there's the general rules that we all, you know, it could be required, or it could be that you can't, they entered letters and they needed to enter numbers. They can be very complex, but like equals is a really important one, because like when we're registering users, we usually ask them to type their password twice, right, to confirm. Well, how do you actually validate that? How is it, what's the magic there that actually makes sure that they're entering the same password twice? It's because we use this equals validation rule. So what it's so short, right? It's so short. All it basically does is say, check that, take the element, take the data from the element, and check it against the other field that we've named in the XML. And we said equals, quote mark, and the name of the field, and go and check against it. And, right? Input get field, get the value from that other field, and check against it, and if it's not true, return it as invalid, send them an error message. So it's like, to me, that's just like, this is how good our API is, that it could be so, this is it. It does all of that. It reads something in from a field that hasn't been saved yet. We've done a save, but it hasn't actually been saved to the database yet, because we're checking it before we're saving. It doesn't lose the data, keeps the data, but it says, hang on, you've got the wrong, your fields don't match. What you've typed doesn't match. So it's like, so easy to use, and this is why we use the API. because we can do things like this. We can write things like this, and then people have written things like this on top of, they've used the Joomla API to write more APIs, and we can use those. So that would be kind of my main thing to say is we want to, like, you have to if you take advantage of the API, Joomla becomes like 1,000,000 times more powerful. You know, and a lot of times, especially, I mean, I know everybody here are Joomla people, but a lot of times if you're coming from PHP, you are I see people fighting with the API. Like, they're like, why is it sending this data? Why isn't it giving me what I want to be able to do these 16 lines of code? And it's like, because you don't need to do those 16 lines of code. You've got it done already for you. So.
Is this the 3.0 one?
Oh no, this has been since 1.6.
Because it looks different than 2.5 and 1.
For equals? No, it's the same.
I don't have that unexpected value.
Oh, right. That's that. Right. 3.0, this is platform 12.1. So platform 12.1 has switched to using exceptions.
Okay.
So
that's not what 2.5 is built.
Well, 12, it works exactly. So the thing about API is, for the people using it, it makes no difference. Like, you still call it exact same way, but what's happening is a little bit different. So one of the big things that changed, I knew there was some important missing element. One of the big things that's changed in the platform is the switch to use PHP exceptions, the PHP native exceptions, as opposed to set the JError API. The JError API is actually a legacy API at this point. You don't have to put legacy with it or anything like that, but it's basically been removed, and it's been moved to the CMS folder actually. So it's kind of up to the CMS to decide when to completely remove it. We're not ready to remove it. JError is still used a lot inside the CMS, and then we know it's used by thousands of extension developers because that's the API we all learned. But now, because PHP 5.3, the exception stuff works so much better. See, remember, with Joomla 1.5, we were still supporting PHP 4. So there's a lot of code and a lot of APIs that were just entirely existed only for the purpose of supporting PHP 4. So a lot of what has happened, and we left that as basically deprecated code for the 1.6 to 2.5 cycle, but that's all been, in the platform, that's all been taken out. The platform only supports 5.3 or greater. The CMS only supports 5.3 or greater for Joomla 3. And, but one of the things we know is that people are not really totally ready to only use exceptions and not use JError. So it hasn't been removed, but you should be moving away from it. If you're developing, you should be moving to using exceptions. And there's definitely good examples in the CMS, in the platform itself that shows you how to use exceptions. And we're trying really hard to always, and I think it's actually very well covered right now, to always use a proper exception name, one of the standard exception type names, not just say throw exception, but actually give you the information about why you're getting an exception. And to give a decent message that if you're logging will go to your log. So you'll know why you're getting exceptions. And Scott's going to give a talk about error log tomorrow. So people should go to that talk because it's really important, because that's how you know what you need to change, even if it's now, especially because we do try to give this layer of protection for people with older code. So that's what that kind of means. It's nice that we do that, but that does mean that eventually, you forget, I have to change that. And then eventually that API is going to be removed, and you'll have to deal with the problem then. So it's better, take advantage of the little transition period to get rid of JError. It also means, and this is actually hard, that now the platform, instead of throwing JErrors, which wasn't even really throwing. Now it's throwing exceptions. So that means we have to catch the exceptions in the applications. There's a lot of places in applications where we used to say, we are going to raise an error here, but now what we have to do is catch an exception. And then you have to decide, what am I going to do when I catch this exception? I just log it. It might be that I stop. It might be that I put a message up to a user, but most of the time, I mean, I always had strong objections to JError on this basis, that I did not want site visitors to see those errors. I always felt those errors are the business of the developers and the webmaster. They're not really the business of a site visitor. They should be like hidden away. And that's what the exceptions are going to do for us. They kind of say, instead of always either putting up that really ugly error page, or putting up a notice, or putting up a warning. I mean, most of the time, I guess people weren't seeing notices, but putting up warnings that users would see. Even this morning, my cousin's website, she has a 1.5 website, and that I made for her a long time ago. And she called last night, and I got a message when I got home saying, there's this error showing on my homepage. I was like, oh man, of course, I'm like trying to write my talk. I can't really go fix this. But it was, it was because the host had upgraded to 5.3. And so now all of a sudden, they're putting up this error in this notice. It's not an error, it's a notice saying that you have a problem, you're using deprecated code. So that's I don't think a website, it should never, in my opinion, that should never show on your homepage. I don't mind, I mean, I actually think it would be kind of cool if it would show on your administrator, or if we had, and this would be cool for someone to write, is to write a way to read your error file straight from your administrator, your log. So, but right now we don't have that. But in my opinion, those should never show. They should never show on the front end of a site. So the exceptions are really going to help us with that. We're going to catch those. We're going to just kind of put up, if something really is totally not working, we'll just put up a simple, redirect to we'll do something. You have to decide, actually, as the application developer, what are you going to do when you get an error, an exception back. But it is a pain. Like, if you are counting on getting an error and you get an exception, it's not going to work. So they put in a lot of places in the platform, they put in kind of a legacy handling, which is if JError is on, allow to use JError from the legacy. But in the newer code, especially, that's not there. Because the expectation is if it's the more modern, the newer platform code does not have to have legacy support for that stuff. So you have to kind of be aware of where you're going to be getting exceptions. So, okay, I have 3 minutes left. Any questions? Question?
Do you use JForm other than just with XML building?
You can use a string. You can use an XML string.
Okay, but it has to be from an XML
yes.
type source.
It has to be from an XML type source. And there's two methods. There's one for reading from a string and one from reading from the XML.
I mean, as far as I've seen, at least what I've done in Joomla, it's always just for parameters and things like that. Would you use JForm for like a front end form?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Just build off XML. Yeah. Or XML, like I said, XML string. And the great thing about JForm is you can inject. Like if you read the form, I didn't put up the form API, the full form API code, but you can inject subforms. You can replace fields. Like any field that's in core Joomla, you can replace with JForm. One of the great things, 1.6 forward, is using a plugin to inject a form based on context, like a subform. So you can have special code depending on whatever. And yeah, so JForm has like so much to it that people have not seen. Like they're just, because everybody just sees how you use it in the back end. But, because the CMS itself, doesn't do a lot with forms in the front end. All we do is we create web links, we create articles, and we log in. And I guess edit the profile. But the profile plugin is a good example, actually, of how to optionally inject fields into, has people tried that, the profile plugin? Do you know what I'm talking about? You have? Yeah. So that is a field, that's a plugin. It's actually supposed to be just an example of how to add extra fields to the registration form. You can add your own fields, like it has a folder with one XML file in it, but you could add additional XML files to that folder, and then you could have other fields. So, and it's just and you can do complex selection of fields based on whatever variables you want to pull in from either from a logged in user or from the session or wherever else, from context. Okay, Scott's cutting me off. I'm happy to talk more later. I'm going to talk next about how to use the API to maybe build something on the platform. Yes?
And I just want to add, there's a brief survey which I'm going to pass around. If you could fill it out, you can just leave it on the chair there on your way out.
Great. Okay.